Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chinmay Rahandale, and I am a research intern at Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. It is a great pleasure to extend a warm welcome to all to another edition of ICS Semester Seminar. The title of today's seminar is The Third Plenum and the CPC's Two-Line Struggle. The characterization of China as an emerging superpower attempting to challenge the America's rule-based international order is in sharp contrast to the domestic debates, especially in politico-ideological terms, where CPC appears to be caught in the crosshairs of a struggle between two lines. The ongoing struggle could be a possible explanation for the delay of the third plenum. After the plenum, newspaper editor noted the omission of a key expression, public ownership, from the official decision document, leading to a swift separation of the journalist and a reaffirmation in the People's Daily that China's stance on state versus private sector remains unchanged. Both controversies reminded analysts and experts of the ideological two-line struggle between capitalist rulers and the left militant revolutionaries during the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s. This seminar discusses that the ongoing two-line struggle is a different from the left-right contestation that prevailed during the Mao's era. The speaker for today's seminar is Dr. Hemant Adlakha. He is an associate professor at the Center for Chinese and Southeast Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Dr. Adlakha is also vice chairperson and an honorary fellow at ICS. He regularly writes on the China's domestic and foreign affairs. His contribution uh, to the ICS translation is prominent. His recent writings in popular media include Xi's well-calculated European visit, What Was the Agenda? In Economic and Political Weekly, and An Expert Explains, Brief from China on the Kamala Harris replacing Biden, the possibility of Trump 2.0 in Indian Express. Also, what did Chinese analysts think of Kim Putin's summit in Pyongyang? The chair for today's seminar is Professor Alka Acharya. She is a professor and chairperson at the Center for East Asian Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and an honorary director of the ICS. She has also been a full-time director and a senior fellow of the ICS. Professor Acharya has also served as editor of the quarterly journal China Report. She was nominated by the Government of India as a member of the India-China Eminent Persons Group and was a member of National Security Advisory Board of the Government of India for 2 terms. Her recent publication is Boundaries and Borderlands, a century after the 1914 Shimla Convention, published by Routledge, and her current research focuses on India-China-Russia trilateral cooperation. Before I hand over to the chair, I would like to ask all the participants to follow a few housekeeping rules. All participants shall be muted during the seminar. Questions may be posted in the chat box along with your name and affiliation. Alternatively, you may use the raise your hand option during the interactive session. You shall then be called upon to unmute yourself. Thank you. I now hand over to the chair. Over to you, Professor Acharya. Thank you. Ma'am, you are muted.
Well, I had unmuted myself. I think somebody was muting me the other. Anyway, so let me once again wish all those who have joined us for this Wednesday seminar today a very warm welcome. Good afternoon or good day to if there are people from other time zones. Today we have a very interesting topic and a very interesting speaker. I was having some very brief chats with Hemant earlier about the third plenum. And Hemant, as has been introduced to you already, is a long-standing scholar and watcher of China. And he comes up with the most interesting kind of snippets, which actually morph into a big argument. And it has always been a great fascination for me personally to get these little tidbits of information which then start to add to a very different picture. And in the lead up to this seminar, his his comment to me was that, I first thought I would delay this for a while, but now suddenly some things have come up which show that there is a very fascinating sideshow going on in Beijing. And so he told me that he would like to make a presentation. And I started to also start to read some things on this. And indeed, I think what we are about to listen to is a series of some rather interesting, dramatic, even thrilling kind of aspects, which are telling us a very different story about what is happening within the Communist Party. I read a short piece, and I'm just going to give you a very brief kind of idea about this piece which appeared in Nikkei Asia. And this was written by a very long time China watcher, very well-known journalist, but say he goes much beyond that in terms of the access he has to high levels within the party. Katsuji Nakasawa. So I read him pretty regularly, and he recently wrote this piece in which he showed that all is not well within the party. And just before the third plenum starts to happen, 15th to 18th, when the third plenum happened, 15th, an article comes out in the Xinhua. And this is about Xi Jinping, the reformer. And according to this article, it was intended to establish Xi Jinping's credentials as a reformer. However, it backfired because the context, I think, is also very interesting, which is that this year, August 22nd, just passed it by, happens to be the 120th birth anniversary of Deng Xiaoping. So eventually, what started off as an attempt to establish Xi Jinping's authority and leading role as a reformer on the eve of the third plenum becomes an issue for attacking Xi Jinping for having tried to confuse the people on this particular role that he seems to have played in this reform process. The article sought to show that it was Xi Jinping elder and then Xi Jinping younger, who between them were scripting the reform story. And so this backlash from the party elders, from second generation Red party members. So eventually, and this is what I think Hemant refers to when he says the two-line struggle, that eventually we see a rather, and while obviously it's not come out in the English language papers, apparently there's a lot that is happening in the Chinese media, that eventually it became an attempt by the opposing forces within the party to show Xi Jinping his actual role as far as reforms are concerned. And clearly, the mantle of Deng Xiaoping as the great reformer is not going to be passed on to Xi Jinping so easily, because according to Nakasawa, the criticisms were so much, they became impossible to contain. And none of this is really known outside. So on this and the two-line struggle, and eventually what it means for Xi Jinping personally and for the party, over to you, Hemant.
Thank you, Alka. Thank you, Chinmay, for giving that introduction, and Alka especially because you put me under pressure. You were right. Earlier, you mentioned we formally started this event, that you had asked me, or you have been asking me actually to get off. And I had said no, and suddenly I changed my mind and I called you up and I said I'm ready. The reason was,
Hemant, just one sec. Your audio is breaking up in between quite a bit. Shall we just let you speak without a video so that, or something, because it's...
let me use my headphone and see if it is better.
Okay, the flow is getting cut quite often.
Okay, is it better now? Is it better now?
Yeah, seems to be. Let's see. Let's go ahead.
Okay. Please point out if you either miss me or if I go silent.
Okay, and I'd like the back end, I mean, our office also to let us know, signal if you think the audio quality is not good, please. Huh? Yeah, Hemant, get on.
So, in fact, I must thank the first organizers of the first ICS panel discussion on this theme of Third Plenum. I think that was organized and moderated brilliantly by Anand. It was on 21st August, if I am not mistaken with the date. And I had listened to that panel discussion from the beginning till the end. And I must say that that actually inflated my appetite for more Third Plenum and what is going on. The previous day, when Alka had asked me at the Giri Deshankar Memorial Lecture, why don't I come up with it? So I said no, because I was really not ready with any particular specific theme or topic in my mind. But next day, after listening to this panel on Third Plenum, as I said, my appetite increased. And although I must also confess that when I was not feeling very excited after the discussion, because I thought a lot more had been left unsaid by various panelists. But there was a question during the question answer session towards the end, I think that was asked by one of our PhD researchers, Harvi Chaturvedi, regarding the public ownership. And I think that triggered in me to take up that theme and organize my thoughts around that. That's what I did in the following days. Now, the problem is that we can't just simply pick up Third Plenum and start discussing about two lines unless we go into the background, historical background, get the context very clear. Now, the problem was, as I was preparing for this presentation, that how far back should I go? That was the question I debated with myself. Because two-line struggle is not something which is a new thing happening in the Communist Party of China. Those who are familiar with the history will know. In the pre-49 period also, there were two-line struggles, at least two very famous episodes, two-line struggle of Li San and Wang Ming. And then post-49 also, there have been at least two very specific episodes of two-line struggle. Capitalist roaders like Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping, Mao, the revolutionary left, etc. And then Lin Piao and the leftist line, the so-called leftist line. So, but then I realized that even going back to the late 20s of Li San also is not enough. So I went back to understand much more about Chinese history. Then I realized that I also need to understand very clearly the question which has been long debated and perhaps not answered very clearly when it comes to China. And that question was, why did capitalism did not take place in China, but it took place in England first, whereas the historians, economic historians in particular, have told us that in the 18th century or in the middle of 18th century, the market economy in China was as thriving as in England. So the question was that why did capitalist production relations or industrial revolution or a capitalist market economy did not take place in China? It took place in England. And when I searched for the answer, then I realized that I will have to go further back to understand what happened in England. So, I mean, I'll cut the story short. And then I quickly did some readings and I understood that in 16th century England, the process of capitalist market economy began. And that the state in the 16th century England provided support to merchants who controlled a common land and started accumulating capital. That process by 18th century became quite mature, and there was a merchant class in England by 18th century. And what happened after that, I think in India we know it much better than anybody else. So as we became colonized by that very class in England. And the Opium War that later came in the mid-19th century in China. So this aspect of state providing support to the capitalist accumulation process was missing in Qing Dynasty Chinese state. That was the reason that the capitalist market economy or capitalist production relations or industry, whatever you call it, did not take place in China. And not for the reasons which we are told otherwise. Because that narrative suits a particular kind of propaganda and which continues even to be applied on the Communist Party rule in China today. And I will not go into the details. If anybody asks a question, maybe during Q&A we can. But the essence is
Okay, Hemant, I'll have to request some. Maybe if you put your audio, because now after 1, 2, 3 messages, you see what's happening is your voice suddenly stops. So maybe bandwidth you'll get more if you let's try it loud like this and see if it improves. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is the background why it is relevant for our discussion. It will be perhaps clear as the discussion unfolds. But this is the background. This is the historical context. Because when you look at Lili-san line in the late 20s, and why Mao Zedong at that time preferred to go to the rural countryside in China to organize peasants, other than work for the organization of the working class, Canton at that time. Later on in the 30s, the typical Stalin line brought to China by Wang Ming, etc. So these are all, I think, related to what happened in China in the previous century, etc. But anyway, the other interesting starting point could have been that, related to Xi Jinping. That how do we assess or how do we characterize Xi Jinping? In the sense that whether Xi Jinping is a reformer, whether Xi Jinping is an authoritarian, an autocrat, Marxist, a leftist, and the leftist also of what variety? Because in China, the reformers who have been opposed to the left within the party, they refer to the left as left within double quotes, not a single quote. So they are more threatened by the leftists in the double quote. So, because everybody knows when Xi Jinping was picked up by the collective leadership in 2012, Xi Jinping was picked up because the collective leadership at that time thought that Xi Jinping will protect the interest of the reformer interest group within the party, was facing a lot of opposition and resistance from the conservatives within the party, who had become rather strong during the decade-old leadership under Jinping. That is why we are told, we have read also in the literature available, that Hu Jintao was a weak leader, because perhaps he could not keep the flock together within the party or the party leadership. Xi Jinping comes as a reformer, and then very strangely, in the process, he removes his clothes of a reformer and he becomes a hardcore Marxist. And that is something which I do not understand how to explain. And related to that puzzle is also, especially what we have been told since the last party congress, that Xi Jinping has brought in the important positions in the party, in every forum in the party, is loyalists. My question earlier also had been, and I have written about it. So my question is still, that if it's a question of Xi Jinping surrounded by and filling in all the important posts is loyalists, then what is the issue? Why does he need the loyalists? What is the crisis of the leadership? That question remains unanswered. Like the previous question which I raised, that if Xi Jinping was a reformer in 2012, then how do we explain how he has turned into a hardcore Marxist who wants to revive the Maoist era rule, etc., etc. Because at least I do not get the clear answers on. So my position is, especially when we look at the third plenum, and the why third plenum was delayed by 17 months, unprecedented, of course. And finally, everything was fine when third plenum concluded on 18 July. Earlier, Alka referred to Nikkei Asia, that article on 15, referring to that article or commentary by Xinhua News Agency on 15 July, the opening day of the third plenum. The Xinhua commentary was projecting Xi Jinping as the reformer, as a true reformer. These were the words. In fact, it went on to claim that Xi Jinping is a bigger or a greater reformer than Deng Xiaoping. So again, the question comes that what is going on in the party? Of course, there is a factional infighting going on. But what is the infighting about? Is it because of Xi Jinping's personal ambitions to grab more power? Or is it policy issues or issues related? Or is it ideological? And that is what I meant in my abstract also, which was circulated, that it is qualitatively, as Alka put it, qualitatively different from the left-right two-line struggle in the past or during war. So my contention is that there is no left or there is no leftist left inside the CPC any longer. There is no left in the party. Let us be clear about it. In 1982, the slogan which was introduced by Deng Xiaoping of socialism with Chinese characteristics. The main purpose of that slogan was to oppose and resist the opposition coming from the left to the reforms within the party. And that succeeded finally in 1992, 10 years later, when after the southern tour of Deng Xiaoping, and the party then introduced a new phraseology, said that China is now entering a new phase, which is called socialist market economy, SME. And this was the actual complete success of the reformers within the party against the left. And very interestingly, not perhaps in the party, but outside China, especially in the international media, China watchers abroad, for some strange reason, I don't know why, they do not use the term leftist for these ideological opponents of reforms within the party, and they prefer to address them as conservatives. The explanation best left to the global media. Even so, coming back to the main point now, what makes me think or initiate this discussion centering around that the delay in the third plenum had been caused because of the fierce two-line struggle or line struggle going on inside the party. In fact, I would say that there is a three-line struggle, not two-line struggle. And the third line is actually outside the party of the leftist in the double quotation, and who have become once again very strong. And that is the pressure which the leadership is facing as the economy has failed to show any signs of growth. And now, on the day the third plenum took place, there were reports that second quarter growth rate was actually less than 5%. So perhaps it is very difficult for China to achieve a growth rate of 5%. Right. So this is the background. This is a political context in which we see the plenum, the decisions taken at the third plenum, the debate that took place before the third plenum. Okay. Now, the very interesting point is that my doubts about whether one can call it a two-line struggle or three-line struggle, which is going on in the party, has any basis or not, actually has been confirmed or vindicated by the debates unfolding inside China, not by what happened outside China in terms of reactions to the third plenum outside. For example, the reactions from China watchers or experts, economic experts, or corporate analysts, West, etc., to the decisions or the decision document, the third plenum. The communique was released 18 July, and the full document called decision rating was released on 21st July, both in English and Chinese. The reactions, especially outside China, were, for example, disappointed, repetitive, incoherent, contradictory, etc. And about the economic planning for the next 5 years, again outside China, among foreign watchers, very interesting analysis has come up. One in particular I would like to point out is that the third plenum resolution has continued to support, has given continued support for the public sector, SOEs, even while pledging to create a level playing field for private sector. This was very interesting because outside China, the analysts and the experts were giving us this kind of a reaction. And one day after the decision document was released, it was released on 21st July, and on 22nd July, a very well-known voice from the Chinese media, former editor of the Global Times, he wrote a blog and posted it on its social account, in which he claimed that the language used in the resolution adopted at the Third Plenum has omitted a very important phrase, and he compared the Third Plenum resolution of the 20th Party Congress, which was held on 15th, 18th, with the Third Plenum resolution of the 18th Party Congress in 2012. And he said a very important phrase has been omitted in the current resolution of the Third Plenum, and which is that public sector is now no more the mainstay. That means public sector and the private sector now going to be at this. This was like a bombshell. And outside China, of course, media reported this only focusing on, so soon after Xi Jinping published or Xi Jinping put this post on his social account, WeChat, and he has apparently 25 million followers or something. Put this on, was formerly Twitter, now called X. X also, where he has 2 million followers. So immediately there was a backlash, especially from the leftists in double quote, intelligentsia in China, who immediately attacked Xi Jinping, condemned him, and charged him of two things. One, of violating the party constitution, and two, undermining the CPC rules, and demanded from the party that not only his Xi Jinping membership should be stripped of his membership of the party, but very strict punitive action be taken against. Now, outside China, in the media, for some strange reasons, it was not reported in this much detail, except that the very next day, the same evening, 22nd July, Xi Jinping's post was removed and deleted from all social media accounts, including Twitter or whatever, told to remove. And since then, he has gone silent. He has been censored. There is no more voice of Xi Jinping being heard since 23rd June. I mean, it was not just that. Then a week later, on 30th July, party's main news organ, People's Daily, came out with a front page feature or a commentary exclusively focused on this controversial issue of public ownership, and very categorically tried to establish that there has been no change or there has been no dilution in the party's commitment to the public sector or SOEs as the means. Now, the fact that on the one hand, Xi Jinping has been silent since then, and a week later, People's Daily had to come out with a front page, is a very good indication that something very serious has been going on. That is what. Now, I don't know if somebody can tell me how much time I have here. How much time I have?
Well, you can go on for another 10 minutes, Hemant, but I think the quality of your audio really is quite poor, and everybody seems to.
What do I do?
So either you have to speak closer to the mic, or I don't know. There's some, because in between your words are just getting lost, and then we pick up. So we managed to piece together. At least I'm managing to piece together the thing, but it's really very poor audio quality here.
Okay, let me try and change to another device. Just give me 1 minute.
Are you speaking, Hemant? We can't hear anything.
No, I'm changing a device. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry for that. Is it okay now?
Oh my God, you should have started off like this. This is perfect. Okay, so 10 minutes more. If you could just wrap up your argument, we can start discussion.
I've changed the device now, so
This is good.
okay. So I think I was at Xi Jinping two-line struggle at the Third Plenum, etc. I mean, I quickly wanted to also bring in another historical context to make the context very clear of what I had earlier said, that how do we understand or characterize or evaluate the personality or political outlook of Xi Jinping. Do we take him as a reformer? I mean, this is a strange thing. The outside world is out and out trying to tell us that Xi Jinping is this authoritarian, autocratic, hardcore Marxist now, who wants to govern China with an iron glove, etc. And inside China now, the state media, especially the Xinhua commentary also, which Alka earlier also referred to, I mean, is, if we call it state propaganda, then it is out to establish Xi Jinping as a great reformer. And in between, as I had said earlier, that be under no illusion that, I mean, Xi Jinping does not belong to the left. And Xi Jinping is not a Marxist either. And I mean, for example, I had earlier also mentioned it in other forums, that there is no agenda of the CPC, this regime, as the earlier regime, reformist regime under Hu Jintao or Chiang Kai-shek. There is no agenda of this Xi Jinping regime to do anything to take care of the interest of the either working class or working population of China, or the marginalized peasant rural countryside population, or even migrant workers. In fact, it's a very interesting, sociologically, it's a very interesting divide of the Chinese society, Chinese population, that nearly 400 million middle class is there, and the same number of working people population is there, and the same number, almost 400 million, is the migrant population. Migrant population, of course, is somewhere between 350 to 370 million. So it is another challenge for the regime, which direction the economic planning should go, what policy to make, which suits the interest or meets the interest or benefits the needs of all the people. So once Xi Jinping came out with this claim that the party's third plenum resolution has now omitted public sector as the mainstay, there was almost a tsunami of writings, especially in the leftist media platforms, which was going on earlier also. But now specifically, I'll just give you some idea what kind of writings are coming up, have been coming up even before the third plenum. For example, there is a huge debate going on in China on the famous Deng Xiaoping slogan of let some people become rich first. So now the questions are being raised that for how long these people will be, these privileged people will be allowed to become rich. And who determines who are these people who will be allowed to become rich first? The party must put an end to this. Similar debates are now raising questions that, for example, why are some people in the party condescendingly describing or looking upon the first 30 years of Maoist era? Or what is socialism? These debates are now almost on average every day. I come across at least several articles on these variety of themes and this wide range of topics. And I mean, those who say that there is nothing which is published in the Chinese media without the permission of the party. So then that makes it very interesting. If somebody is allowing them, giving them permission to write freely about these issues, then also the question is, what is going on? I mean, for example, everybody is familiar with the Fang phenomena. During COVID early days, I was among the first one to write about that. But there is one very interesting thing which has not been actually pointed out, neither in the global media nor in other forums, that the party did not attack Fang. Party did not prevent Fang from going and getting her writings translated and published in America. Party did not stop her from making money out of that project. It was only the leftist, double quote, leftist intelligence. So this again is a very strong indication of something that is going on in the party is indicating towards a two-line struggle. But within the party, as I said, there is no left versus right. It is right versus right. Within the reformer faction, within the reformer interest group also, there are two factions. That is why the fight has become fierce. And the one faction is who doesn't care about CPC rule. That faction cares about only the marketization. And you call it oligarchs or whatever. It is the same group actually now who had picked up Xi Jinping and brought him to power. And the biggest name in this is Wen Jiabao and his family. I mean, according to reports, Wen Jiabao and his family, especially his son and daughter, their family empire, their assets, actually they are the richest in China, crosses 40 billion yuan. Then comes Jiang Zemin family, around 10 to 15 billion yuan. Then comes Chu Rongqi and family, around 5 to 8 billion yuan. And all others are Lilliputs, including Xi Jinping himself. So I'll stop here because Alka is also getting impatient now. So thank you so much. Of course, lots of things to be connected together that I will perhaps try to do in the Q&A session. Thank you.
No. I wasn't getting impatient. I was really quite absorbed by this amazing narrative that you put out there. And it's a pity that you didn't use this device because your voice was crystal clear now, and I think some interesting tidbits came in at the end. So thank you, Hemant. This has been really a very fascinating account, and I hope there are enough people here closely watching this because, the interesting thing is that when so much is happening and you're saying there's a tsunami of writings, and I haven't seen any Western media pick up on this tussle within the party. The Western media is in fact still dominated by accounts of how the macroeconomic picture of China is declining, China is slowing down, growth is slowing down. So concerns are being raised, but that there is this turmoil that is taking place within different factions, amongst different factions within the party. This has not come out, and I find that a bit strange, and maybe you can explain why that has happened. But the difference that is sought to be brought out, which you have touched upon, what do you make of this? I'm just raising it here, you can take it up later. That this difference that has emerged from both the Nikkei Asia article as well as what you have said, reforms per se and reforms and opening up. All right. So the criticisms that have emerged are all about how Xi Jinping is trying to create a kind of a confusion amongst people because, as I said, the shadow of Deng Xiaoping is looming large, and the opening up was all about Deng Xiaoping's initiative. So reforms, there we could say that what you have indicated about this tussle within the party, that right and right. So about the reforms as such. But the two-line struggle, therefore, is not within the party, but clearly there is between now. So the difference here is that if the 60s was a two-line struggle within the party, capitalist roaders versus the revolutionary socialists, now it is a two-line struggle between the party on the one hand, which is weakened by an internal internal tussle, and the, as you say, double quotes left. How is this going to play out within the political system in China? That if you have people outside the party who are on this attack mode, how does it affect? And if you are pointing to the oligarchs and their hold, is it going to bring about some fundamental reforms within the party? So I think the interesting thing is not so much about the reforms, but about the direction of the party. Strong words, Hemant. There is no left in the CPC any longer. Xi Jinping is not a Marxist. Let us be clear on that. So yeah, what is the Chinese Communist Party today? So I'll just stop with those initial reactions. There are some questions here which I, Chinmay, let me just take them up. Anand,
Alka, before you read, before we go to the question and answer round, let me quickly give a brief response to what you have said.
Okay, go ahead.
Because let me reiterate that there is definitely a two-line struggle in the party. But that two lines in the party is right versus right, not right versus left. And who are these two rights? So, as I said towards the end, both are reformist interest groups. One is that who is only interested, mostly all the big oligarchs who are now becoming very impatient, especially it's been long time that Chinese economy is going either in the slow growth mode or not picking up. So they are worried. So for them, they are okay with embracing full market or capitalist free market economy. And even if it comes to embracing liberal democracy, they have no problem. And the other right group, which apparently, perhaps we need to dig out more, is the Xi Jinping led group, who at any cost will not give away the power of the CPC and who want to safeguard and strengthen the CPC rule. Because if the CPC rule goes, then they also go. But this is what is the interesting thing, that this second right is now seeking support from the left outside, but they are not still picking up the left agenda. I mean, the left, double quote left outside the party, is even criticizing what Xi Jinping himself had initiated 2 years ago, his historical nihilism. The leftists outside the party are poo-pooing historical nihilism. They are saying, what is this nonsense? They're using this language, not my language, right? So that is why I'm saying that we cannot perhaps understand it only when we say two-line struggle. It's actually three-line struggle. And the third line, and also because the resentment and anger among the working population, among the peasant population, marginalized peasant population, that is putting up a lot of pressure. There is a fear of implosion. There is a fear of increased social tensions and political opposition outside the party. And to put things in more proper context of why the Western media or the corporate media outside is not picking up these issues. Earlier I forgot, I wanted to start my presentation with that, but because of voice problem and all that, I perhaps forgot. Let me quickly read just 5-6 lines, which is that on June 20, 1989, just 2 weeks after the June 4th massacre in Tiananmen Square, the US President George W. Bush wrote a letter, or a secret letter, to Deng Xiaoping. I hope many people in the audience are not aware of this, otherwise my reading this will become boring. He wrote this secret letter to Deng Xiaoping, and in the letter he said, and I quote, "The United States was not so mad about the CPC sending the army to shoot its people." And Bush then went on to say in that letter that the United States was only a 200-year-old young country, and China was a 5,000-year-old country with great contributions to world civilization. So the Chinese leaders were wise and knew what was best for the Chinese people. Most importantly, and then I will finish my quote, most importantly, Bush assured Deng Xiaoping that Tiananmen Square was not going to stand in the way of the great commercial relations between US and China. This is 2 weeks after Tiananmen Square, and this letter was subsequently published in a book which Bush had written, which was called All the Best. That was his memoirs.
Okay. That's interesting. The great commercial relations. Right. All right. Thanks, Hemant. Those were very useful kind of supplements to the overall argument that you had made. Now, I'm going to just quickly run through these questions. I think, Anand, your earlier one, which you had missed, Hemant has brought it back, the 2 lines, 3 lines, and so on. But he has got 2 questions, which I think are, in one sense, supplementing this larger issue of 2 lines. So Anand wants to know whether if these are outside the struggle is actually within the party also, as you have said. So Anand, that's one part of it. But he says that it's also outside the party. So from your viewpoint, what is the CPC's current ideology? And if the formulation is that she is a reformer, what is he reforming? So that's two of his questions, which I'm fusing into one. And there's a related question here, so I'll put this along with what Anand has suggested, which is that what is the ideology of the leftists? So if she is a reformer, what is he reforming? And if the leftists are opposing Xi, what is their ideology? I think, could you just address these two?
Well, very, very simply, the ideology of the CPC or the ideology of the Xi Jinping loyalist faction, if I put it that way, is to remain in power by safeguarding and strengthening the CPC rule. Along with, because they have failed in the last 10 years, and perhaps that what earlier we all used to understand and say that as far as the party is able to deliver economically, then the party will continue to earn its legitimacy. I think that thinking has now gone. That is as far as the party ideology is concerned. That and the leftist double quote outside the party, their ideology is the same, socialist orthodoxy. Basically, they are talking about class. They are talking about class contradictions. They are talking about class struggle, and they are talking about also that is where they have the convergence of interest with the Xi Jinping faction. They are willing to support Xi Jinping as long as Xi Jinping is willing to protect and strengthen and consolidate the CPC rule. So the leftists outside the party, now they are basically on three issues: the class struggle, and the CPC rule, and the public ownership. These are the three main issues. Because in the official debates and discussions, and class struggle, of course, everybody knows, has been out of the discourse ever since reform started. Right? So now the debate has become very, very intense between the leftist intelligentsia and minded. If you ask anybody in China, they'll tell you that in the universities, among intellectuals, among think tanks, among media, still there is an overwhelming dominance and majority of people who think or who believe in socialist orthodoxy. And that is what is putting the pressure.
Interesting. Curiouser and curiouser, as Alice would say. But Priyanka Keshri has said she has a question on Xi Jinping's anti-corruption drive and its role in CPC's internal dynamics. Priyanka, 2-minute question or shorter.
You see, corruption.
No, I'm wondering if she has. I'm sorry, Priyanka, do you want to have a specific pinpointed question on that? You just mentioned anti-corruption drive role. So do you have something very specific on that? Hello, Priyanka, are you there? All right, if she comes back, we'll take this up. But Partha has two questions about, once again, the third line. I hope, Hemant, you don't have a couple of more lines up your sleeve. Huh? I can't deal with fourth line, fifth line here. Third line is Partha saying, do you see Confucianism as a vehicle for this intra-party struggle because it is difficult to be portrayed as anti-China? So would that become a kind of a refuge where people could just take their attempts to bring a resolution? I don't know. And next point he makes is that Vanjiapao at USD 5 billion is quite small compared to the wealth of Chinese private sector, and his rank will be below number 50. So what's the big deal about it? I guess that's what Partha is trying to say.
No, I didn't calculate in USD. I said 40 billion yuan for Vanchapao and family.
You've gone, your voice is cracking again.
No, am I audible?
Yeah, now it comes back.
I'm saying that I didn't say it in terms of USD. What I read in the media somewhere, it was that Vanchapao and family, their family assets or empire is 40 billion yuan. Right. And that is much more than the family assets of Jiang Zemin.
All right. So I guess what I would have to say over here is, Partha, that we are talking of the former premier, Communist Party member, dedicated to the ideals of the party, and then to have amassed so much wealth. I guess that is the contradiction. So
Yeah.
he will be number 50 or what? Because suddenly you have now a group of people who are completely, in the first 10% or so of the wealth distribution. Rappai has a question saying Xi is in many ways his father's son. Oligarchs are well known, but linkages to other power centers like military and newly emerged business class is not well known.
Well, Partho's point about Confucianism.
Yeah. Sorry, I missed.
I mean, I don't see that figuring anywhere in the debate, which is actually happening between the leftist quote unquote double quote intelligentsia and this thing. I mean, Confucianism is nowhere. It is basically, I mean, they are reviving this debate of class struggle and public ownership, etc., etc.
Okay. So Confucianism will just sort of, hover in the background and be dusted whenever they need to sort of show the culture kind of dimension.
Perhaps.
So Rappai
Perhaps.
So Rappai wants to know linkages with military, and Xi Jinping as his father's son. Are there connections, or let's say among these debates and forces, does this aspect come that there are now powerful linkages between the military and these new business classes? So oligarchs are one thing, but then here is the power. So do they have any linkages there?
See, especially the debates which I have seen after the Third Plenum and Xi Jinping's claim of public ownership now being omitted from the resolution. In that particular period of last couple of weeks, I have not come across such debates of what is happening to the PLA, etc. But the earlier debates and writing somewhere, I mean, if you look at corruption, which was earlier also somebody was trying to ask, and since corruption actually is a structural problem, it's not that you arrest the corrupt people and the corruption will go away. That everybody knows.
Yeah. So her question was really that: is he just using it to consolidate his position, or is it really addressing that structural issue that you just mentioned?
So that structural issue, of course, is very difficult to address as long as these so-called market or capitalist market economy policies continue. So that's about it. And that happened even before Xi Jinping came. Hu Jintao also had started talking about corruption before the party congress, where he handed over the power to Xi Jinping, etc. So Xi Jinping is not the one who initiated anti-corruption drive, right? And about this PLA and all that, as I said, that there are interest groups within the party, and these interest groups are linked with interest groups within the PLA also. So perhaps there is, that factional linkages or factional infighting, which might be, linked with factions within the PLA also. But there is no concrete, open discussions or debate involving like PLA's loyalties to Xi Jinping or PLA's loyalties to anti-Xi Jinping faction, etc., etc., that I can't comment on.
Yes, now we have one question from Ambassador Nambiar saying that is Xi Jinping seeking to portray himself today as representing the interests of the broader middle classes who are seen in favor of reform than the other rightists, so the other rightists within the party that you characterize as the oligarchs. If he is trying to do that and build this base outside, as it were, you think this is a strategy which would be more successful?
Of course, the focus is more on not upsetting the middle class. I mean, that is what the reform was all about, right from the beginning. Now, the question is, since the economy is not performing well, and I mean, if I go by what the leftist media is claiming, and earlier mentioned this in other forums also, the leftist media says that today the Chinese society is vertically split between those who believe in supporting full-fledged capitalist market economy and even becoming pro-liberal democracy and pro-America and all that. So there is a very sizable section on the one hand. And on the other hand, you have the opposite group who is totally opposed to market economy, totally opposed to further deepening of the reform, totally opposed to this class inequality, etc., etc. So, as I said, there are slogans being given by intellectuals, such as during Mao time we had heard the 3 old mountains, right? Now the old mountains have been replaced by new mountains. And these 3 new mountains are healthcare, education, and jobs. And there are some delegates to party congress also, NPC also, who every time raise their voice, but they are one single voice, so nobody pays attention to them. Even 3 days ago, I read one article. I mentioned it to some PhD students also. We were discussing that there is a Professor Li Ling from PETA, and she had been like single voice, a vanguard of, let's say, Chinese working population and peasant population. And she has again written an article asking for universal free healthcare in China. And you know that healthcare in China, there are only 2 societies in the world where the healthcare is completely, where the public expenditure in healthcare is minimal. And these 2 societies are America and China. And they compete with each other of who will spend less, right?
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, now we have one more question from Raj Gupta. Thank you very much, sir, etc. Like the 2-line struggle led to many internal party purges in the Mao era, do you think the current line is also behind some purges? So do we anticipate another bloodbath? And do you think the prolonged regulatory crackdown on the tech companies, which are some of the biggest, is also part of the current 2-line struggle?
So sorry, could you please repeat the second part, last part?
Do you think the prolonged regulatory crackdown on the tech companies, which are some of the biggest, also a part of the current struggle? As tech companies are leading market economy and market indices without keeping parties' interests in mind. So now we have army, we have party oligarchs, and now the tech companies. I mean, this is becoming a very good soup. Huh?
This is the right versus right struggle, actually, the tech companies.
Oh.
And because the problem is that the tech companies are actually are involved on a large scale in capital flight. And that was the reason 2 years ago, perhaps, I mean, I'm not referring to the attacks on Jack Ma or something, but I'm referring to how this TT, this company, was forced actually to not issue an IPO in the New York Stock Exchange. I mean, there is a whole explanation of the Wall Street interest in the Chinese high-tech companies and the Chinese private companies, and why Chinese high-tech and other private big players, including Evergrande and Lenovo and all that, why are they always interested in issuing or registering in the stock exchange in New York, or issuing IPOs there? So that has been now come under the radar, because one, data is being smuggled out of China by them, and second, because of capital flight. And this is directly affecting the interest of some oligarchs. So you can say that this is maybe the nationalist reformist interest group, you know. So purges, Raj Gupta's earlier question of purges and all that. So I'm not very sure who is purging whom. I think both the right groups are purging each other.
Okay. So that, Hemant, leads to the other question. Inevitably, and it has been asked by Sandeep Rawat, that could a regime change be possible? And who could be the next?
I have already said that one of the biggest concerns of the CPC leadership, by CPC leadership, I mean the Xi Jinping regime, the one which is in power, is the increased social tensions and some kind of a political implosion. That cannot be ruled out. What form it will take, it's difficult to say. But definitely, there is a groundswell of that kind of concern, because, as I said, that the state, before Xi Jinping also and during Xi Jinping's decade of rule, or 12 years of rule, has not addressed these issues. When Xi Jinping came to power, the total number of migrant workers in China was around 240 million. Today, the total number of migrant workers is around 350 million. That is the achievement of Xi Jinping. In 10 years, he has added more than 100 million to the floating population of migrant workers. So the resentment is, of course, increasing, because there is nobody addressing these issues.
Well, I think that was the last question. Doesn't seem to be any. In any case, we are reaching. Okay, now Partha jumps in again. He says, even if we reach a higher level of development, we, as in what? Partha, do you mean we as in India? And acquire stronger financial resources in the future, no, this is a quote from an article that came up in Nate Sun, quoting Xi Jinping. Okay, firmly drive common prosperity, and that quote is that we should not set aims that are excessively high and or provide excessive guarantees. We must resolutely prevent ourselves from falling into the trap of nurturing lazy people through welfareism. Yeah, I think it's
so
exactly with what Hemant has been saying.
This again proves my point that what has been going on is a typical classical neoliberal regime.
Yes. Indeed. So Anand jumps in with Xi Jinping and CPC are no more discussing common prosperity that has already been put in cold storage.
Absolutely.
Indeed. Well, it was in any case, a frozen corpse. There was no need to put it in the cold storage. Anand, you have your hand up. You want to come in? I read out your question, but then how will consumption increase, is Partha? Okay, now I think this is.
So that is why in the third plenum, against the expectations of, let's say, a majority of China watchers outside China, I did not get time to quote from Ishwar Prasad, who wrote a very interesting article a week before the third plenum was to open. And in that he said, my fear is that third plenum will become a forum for rote slogans rather than a new policy. And that is what exactly happened. In the third plenum resolution, there is no initiative shown on how the party or the state in China, what measures are they going to take to either increase or either stimulate the domestic consumption or growth rate. There's nothing.
Yeah, Anand, you got a hand up. Want to come in?
I can't. Okay. Thank you. So my question, really, I mean, it's a very interesting debate. My question is generally also about because a lot of the things which Dr. Adlaka mentioned, a lot of this also has origins even right after the reform. So when the party itself says that all contradictions have been resolved and thereof class struggle is entirely over. So how much of this can generally be attributed to Xi Jinping? And of course, Xi Jinping has a lot of things to ask, and also, so instance, the declining status of the labor in China today. That might definitely be with Xi Jinping, but a lot of it has its origins even before Xi Jinping, right at the time of reforms. So, I mean, then all this, whether it is a two-line struggle or a three-line struggle, is it acknowledging the fact that things have started much before, almost 3 or 4 decades before that? Or is it the fact that, okay, things have become more sharper over the last decade? Thanks.
See, thank you, Anand. In fact, Xi Jinping had said at, I think, 2-3 years ago, when the so-called elders, as reported in the global media, they had got together in Peitai He and criticized Xi Jinping, etc., etc. So Xi Jinping had angrily retorted back at them, saying that you picked me up and gave me power to take care of the economic or vested interest in the party who were against the reforms. But you also gave me what was the legacy I received from Hu Jintao? That the Chinese economy was going downwards. It was 8% growth rate at that time. And already the die was cast. So Xi Jinping was actually brought in at a time when the US-China rivalry had already settled. I mean, settled in the sense that rivalry was set. That is why when Hu Jintao went to America in 2011, President Obama openly at the joint press conference complained to Hu Jintao, and he said that China must respect level playing field, especially with the American companies in the Chinese market. So, I mean, you are right. I'm saying that Xi Jinping did not do anything wrong. Xi Jinping was given an agenda by the party to implement. And he was given full backing at that time. So I will say it is other way around, actually. I will say that Xi Jinping is a great survivor. I mean, if you ask me honestly.
True, that he certainly is. And now we are almost at the end of our time, but one last question I will give to Bhim, because they were part of that last panel, and I think he would possibly like to come in here. Bhim, you will have the last word or the last question. Yeah, Bhim, come on, unmute and ask. Hello, Bhim, are you going to come in, or shall we just then... I cannot unmute, he says. Please unmute, Beam, somebody.
I think he's the co-host now. So you can, I think, Beam, you can speak now.
Thank you, ma'am. And yeah, Hemant sir, interesting presentation. My question is with regard to the party building. And what do you see two-line struggle with regard to party building? Because although the party does, the third plenum hasn't talked about much on party building, but at the same time, when we see discussions, debates, and all on and off, we tend to see that there definitely has a churning within the party. But you did hint, allude to some of those, right versus right. Who is right there? So, if I can ask you, like any readings as per your, thank you.
I mean, there are some very interesting readings in English one can refer to. For example, I mean, in order to understand the historical background and context of what is going on now, Anand earlier referred to that the problems now being faced by the CPC or Xi Jinping or this CPC regime had actually their origin 3-4 decades ago when the reform started. Correct. But then, as I said earlier, I mean, there was this, the 1978 December, that 11th CC Third Plenum, which announced the reform policies. And the party then subsequently managed to get the consensus within the party to go ahead with that. All that. There is a very interesting book, actually, written by Isabel Weber in 2021, if I am not mistaken, from Routledge. And the title perhaps is How China Escaped Shock Therapy. And this is all about China's market reform from 1978-79 onwards. So that's a very interesting book to understand what happened, why did the reform begin, etc. And then very, very recently, you have another book by Qin Keyu, that Chinese economist at Oxford, whose book came out last year, the China, the New Playbook, which was reviewed in Business Standard by Ravi Buthalingam last year. And my own review of that book is going to come out soon in EPW, perhaps next month. And that book gives you a very good idea of how the complete capitalist market economy is being implemented in China, especially from the mid-90s to late 90s onwards. And which has absolutely nothing to do with the concerns or the needs or the issues or the problems of the working population or the peasantry. Okay. These are, I mean, in English, these two materials might be useful.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, go on.
No, and at the same time, I mean, I think I wanted to conclude after listening to Bhim's question on something which I seem to have now forgotten.
Okay. All right. If it comes back, I'll give you one line.
No, he was asking about, sorry, sir. I think he was asking about how the party building happens when these two lines of struggles are going on, or the three lines of struggles are going on.
Yeah, so the party building is happening. Party building is happening on the basic line or understanding which is coming from the regime in power now, that Xi Jinping has very clearly communicated to anybody who listens to him that I am not going to be the Gorbachev of China. So let us save the party. Now, whether that party is being saved on Marxian lines or socialist orthodoxy or Marxism being preached by Xi Jinping, that is a question which can be debated. But this line is clear that that Xi Jinping has said it very clearly. I am not going to be the Gorbachev.
In one sense, Gargi, I think that answers a bit of your question, but I will, since we've got just about 4 minutes, I will bring it in because I think in one sense it also gives a conclusion, which she says that at the end, how do we understand this really? Because Xi Jinping, does he need, so what is the interest of the state power faction basically within these two extreme lines? So does Xi Jinping need the left but outside the party so that, you know, he can use that to his ends? Or does he need the faction favoring the market within the party more? So, or does he need them both? So how do you see these two or three lines actually interacting with each other?
See, as I said earlier, that the Xi Jinping group or faction, whatever you call it, that group is very clear that CPC rule has to be strengthened. And for that, one thing is very clear, that during Hu Jintao Jiang Zemin era, that collective leadership and with leadership as a core, that period is gone. And Xi Jinping's powers, that is again an issue of debate, whether Xi Jinping has grabbed power and become stronger and stronger and stronger because of his personal ambition to gain power, or Xi Jinping's rise as a strong man, nobody has actually explained to us, even outside China. There's no clear-cut answer. There's no debate. That if Xi Jinping was brought to power, was picked up by the Jiang Zemin and other elders at that time, then the question is, why did they do that? Perhaps easy answer is because the other side, it was Poshilai. I mean, if you remember, like the third plenum this time was delayed by 17 months. In 2012, the party congress was also delayed by unprecedented delay. There was uncertainty that when will the party congress happen, right? So either Xi Jinping is that kind of a very shrewd politician that who presented himself as a reformer, but actually he was a Maoist, which is very unlikely. One can say that he may have been a very strong nationalist, because, as I said, that there is nothing leftist in his program and policies even now, even in third plenum. There is nothing.
Well, so can we sort of move towards wrapping up today's seminar? Because we've run out of time, we're at the extreme. And I think this whole thing has been absolutely fascinating, more in terms of the new areas that it opens up to be examined. I find it very, very, I mean, this last question that you say, nobody has asked how and why Xi Jinping emerges as the main leader in 2012. So, you know, what occurs to me also is that a large part of these dynamics that are going on today is also, I mean, they could be understood in terms of the gradual emergence of contradictions within the entire reform policies and the inability to reform to resolve those contradictions while they were still maybe, let's say, non-antagonistic. And we reached a point where we are now looking at very strong antagonistic contradictions. How will they be resolved? This is, of course, the big question. And I would like to once again bring the spotlight on those people who are watching this from outside. And the fact that they are not really getting into this debate or nobody is writing about it is equally interesting. I recall the time that Deng Xiaoping comes with his reforms, and he's hailed world over as this great, antithesis to Mao, and who would bring China into the Committee of Nations and economically. And so Deng, the great reformer, come 89, and Deng becomes the communist. Oh, you can't reform these people. They are, ultimately, they will show their true colors. Now, it's a curious twist of fate, if you will, that Xi Jinping starts out as somebody who's wanting to take the reforms to the 4th generation and 5th generation. And yet you have a large response which is about, oh, he's a Marxist. Whereas the reality, as Hemant would have us believe, is that there's no Marxism or left in the country. So what is going to be the understanding of this whole thing? Because it would also be interesting to see how the Western economies, who are now obviously giving way to China increasingly, how are they going to be looking at this new phase in the evolution of Xi Jinping leadership party? So many, many interesting questions here, and some light has been shed on some very, very mysterious developments that took place just before the plenum. So watch this space, as they say in the media. So we will be watching, and hopefully, Hemant, you will be watching it even more closely. So maybe you will come back again with some more insights into this. Thank you very much. It has been truly fascinating. And thank you all for staying on till the end, a large, huge gathering and so many questions. Brilliant Wednesday seminar. Thank you so much, one and all.
Thank you. Thank you, Alka.
Yes, you may conclude. You may conclude.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So with this, we come to the end of today's seminar. We thank Dr. Hemant Adanatha and Professor Alka Acharya for gracing today's seminar with their presence and for giving us their precious time. We also thank all the participants for joining us today. The video of today's discussion shall be available on ICS YouTube channel. We would like to invite you all to the upcoming Wednesday seminar scheduled for 11 September 2024. Further information regarding the event can be found on the ICS website. You may also subscribe to our newsletter for regular updates. Thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thanks.
Thank you.